afternoon. My name is Manuel Cruz. I'm the Director for Homeland Security and Criminal Justice Programs. Thank you all for showing up to this strategic plan, regional strategic plan update. This marks our second year out of the 4 years that we have with the plan, the new revised plan that you see before you. And basically, we've been here the duration or all day today discussing the many programs that the LRGVDC encompasses that only favor you all, the representatives, the stakeholders that are here within the region. This plan cannot exist without the help of you all, because you are the ones that make this plan. We're just the facilitators that produce it and make sure it's available to everyone in the region. Primarily, as everybody knows, this is geared for funding. Funding opportunities that might pop up every so often, every year for sure for some. For example, the Homeland Security and Criminal Justice programs, for sure. Some of these programs do require your participation. In specific, the Criminal Justice program. As you know, it's in years past, the Criminal Justice Advisory Committee has made it mandatory for you to attend, and as well as the state, based on the scoring instrument, as most of you or some of you have been privy to throughout the past years. Today we're going to discuss these programs, the Criminal Justice and the Homeland Security program. And keep in mind that this is a regional plan, a COG plan that encompasses the 3 counties. And of course, the bottom line is to have this, to present it to the legislature, and to also have it available so when the time comes for us to apply for funding, we can use this instrument to do so. Now, some of the key dates to keep in mind that are coming up for this process, we're almost complete, but July 18th is going to be the deadline for all the input from everybody that attended or that did not have the opportunity to attend, to submit their input to each of the program directors via email, telephone, or in person. So July 18th is the deadline for that. August 6th, that's when the final regional plan or regional meeting will take place. As it has today and it will tomorrow, we're going to have a final draft of this plan on August the 6th. August 21st through the 22nd, that's going to be the deadline for us to put the plan together. For example, myself, I'm the coordinator for this event, for this process. Marcio Oviedo, who's the planning director, is the second in command, and is here to help me out. And we're going to be putting all this information together, what we're going to collect today and what we're going to collect tomorrow. And ultimately, on September 24th, that's when we have to pretty much present it before our LRGVDC Board of Directors for approval. And as you can see, September, it's right before the end of the year, so we need to have it ready, complete and ready, so we can submit it up to the state or the federal government upon the deadline of the 2-year mark. So this is a 4-year plan, and every 2 years we make updates or changes in all of the programs. And going back to the criminal justice section, that's going to be the first program that we're going to cover right after the introduction of the first few pages of the plan. But just to elaborate more on the criminal justice section, as this, some of you witnessed this past year with Homeland Security funding and criminal justice funding decreasing, we've had to justify our requests. And the way we do that is by developing these plans. In specific, this regional plan, and we also have a criminal justice regional plan, which both of them are identical. We take information from this plan to incorporate into the programmatic side criminal justice program. And also this year, the state did make it a mandatory item that we needed to create and pass before our board of directors and submit to the CJD, Criminal Justice Division, the Governor's Criminal Justice Division. And so with the plan, they have made it a mandatory requirement because of the fact of funding reductions. As you, for those of you that have been here for a while, back 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, there might have been quite a bit of money that to be passed out. But over the years, with the budget the way it is, the funding has been dwindling down little by little. So now more than ever, applicants have to justify what their gaps are within the criminal justice, or to improve the criminal justice system overall. So without your input and without tying your application to this regional plan, funding more than likely would not be allocated if that is not established. And so that is why we're here today. So your input is most valuable again. And also for those of you that might be shy, that don't want to voice out your opinion, that's all right. We got you covered with that. So if you take a look, hopefully you picked up the material that was out there. But if not, you have a blank goals and comments form that you should have. Looks something like that. And so if you have any comments, whether it's in the goal, objective, the purpose, the measurable outcomes, or the strategies or potential resources, feel free to write that information down if you want to speak out. And I don't know if you noticed, there's a camera in front. That's not for my benefit, that's for your benefit. We're recording this whole process. The main objective for this is to have this for future availability. If somebody would be interested in participating, this would be the tool that we would use to engage that person or organization to participate in this effort. So at the end of this 2 days, this whole process or the filming is going to be condensed, and the video will be made available to the public for them to view each of the sessions if they like, or the overall project. And so again, if you have changes, feel free to write them down, and don't forget to leave them behind. Hand it to me or Melissa Armijo, who's up here. She's helping me out. She's the scribe, so any changes that you voice out are going to be made over here by her. And so that's what we're going to do. Okay, so we'll move into the actual regional strategic plan. First, I'd like to start at the beginning of the first few pages of the plan. Pretty much we've covered all the programs this morning and this afternoon. The one before me covered these sections. But each program might have its own unique trends or weaknesses, strengths, and so forth. So we want to make sure we give the opportunity to each of the departments or each of the programs to embed any information that they might see fit that might benefit the regional strategic plan. So we get into the trends, and as I go along, we have quite a bit of objectives, both in the criminal justice and homeland security section, roughly almost about 20. So we're gonna try to scheme through these pretty quickly. But again, feel free to jot down your ideas, your suggestions and comments, and we'll pick them up at the end. We're gonna start with the trends. The trends are also, just keep in mind that this is unique to the region. It's not specific to a department or a city or even a county. It deals with the overall 3-county region. Okay, so if anybody has any comments to make on the trends, and hopefully you picked up the handouts that are outside, but if you have any comments or any information that you want to add in the trends, please let me know so we can capture it. And if you have any questions, any comments, inputs, please raise your hand. We do have a mic in the back. We'll hand it to you, and just state your name, your agency, and provide your comments or input of the plan. And so the trends, anybody have any comments, any additions that you want to make relevant to criminal justice or homeland security?
Where would we add, I guess, in the trends for veterans? For veteran services, and also criminal justice?
It would be a general statement that you would, a general trend that you, or actually a challenge. If there's challenges out there that face our veterans, that we can note it on here. But if you have any in mind, please feel free to voice it out so we can capture it. And in what section?
Cameron County is working on the Veterans Court. And I don't see anything in here where we could maybe support that.
Okay, and you're referring to the trends and challenges?
Yeah.
Could we just do the increasing services for veterans program?
Okay, now is that in the trends though? Increase services for veterans? Is that what was said?
Yes.
Okay, under trends? Okay. Yes, Rosie?
I think increasing need of emergency shelter for, with the Rio Grande Valley Empowerment Zone. We only have one emergency shelter in Hidalgo County with 10 beds. That is not enough for the population that we serve and to house victims of violent crime. So there's a need for an additional shelter to be able to house more victims.
Okay, so we would do that under challenges, increase, right?
Where is that?
So I don't know, can you put it on the transfer, it says increasing, because they have increasing
Okay.
in transitional housing, but it doesn't say emergency shelter, because emergency shelter is only to house victims of crime.
Okay.
And they don't fit into the housing, they need safety, not just a housing option.
Okay. Melissa, we got it.
So where do you put it?
Yes.
Also, increase, Graciela Salinas from Cameron County Planning Department. Also increase safe rooms for emergency management during hurricane disasters.
Okay.
What do you mean safe rooms? Like shelters?
Yes.
For the
Shelters.
public or for the emergency management program?
It's for the public. It serves as a community public room, but it's designed to provide shelter for when you're evacuating residents.
So it's like a shelter?
It is like a shelter, but it's not like what she was talking about under shelters for domestic violence and that security. That's different. That's why they want to call it a shelter. Homeland Security Emergency Management calls it safe rooms.
I just don't like the term safe rooms because to me it's a confined little space.
Well, it really is.
But
But it's not
funding
little.
out there is for shelter, at least what I've seen. For funding for FEMA and emergency.
FEMA calls it a safe room.
When I read the RFP, it says shelters.
It says shelters. I've seen it as safe rooms, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
And it's a community facility.
Yeah, I know what it
It
is.
can be used during the year, depending on the community where it's being built. But then when it's time to evacuate people, it's a facility where you can bring some of the people. And down here, we need that because many times we cannot evacuate people and take them all the way up to San Antonio or wherever. It becomes a very expensive and a long ordeal. Many times we do that.
Right.
But other times, there are local people that their housing is not good enough, and we need to evacuate them out of their homes. And so these safe rooms are being built now, or shelters, if you want to call it.
Okay, I've heard the term special needs. Would that encompass what Rosie was speaking about, or two separate
No,
items?
an emergency shelter for victims is a safe area where victims are going to be secured at all times. You cannot put them in a homeless shelter because of the safety. So, and it's also a temporary shelter, it's not long-term, it's only when the person was abused and then they get transferred to the shelter because it's unsafe to go back to their home.
Okay.
But it does not serve for natural disasters, it's only for victims of crime.
Okay, so shelters for victims of crime and then shelters for emergency management.
The ones for emergency management might, maybe fit better under
Homeland Security.
Yes.
Okay.
So maybe
Oh, just
that's what they do.
keep in mind that this right here, the trends is overall. It'll cover,
Overall? Okay,
yes,
so then we're
yes.
fine.
Yes, we're fine, yes. If we include those two in this section, it's covered. Yeah, the actual sections don't deal with that specific, the trends or the challenges.
Right.
Okay?
You're just going to say natural disaster.
Yes. Well, yes, not just natural, but sometimes you have man-made disaster and you need to evacuate people.
Shelters for man-made and natural disasters.
Yes.
Okay, Melissa, got it? Yes, ma'am.
I just have one recommendation. I'm with Vail. My name is Melissa Escamilla. And I'm reading under Rising Comprehensive Public Health Care Needs for Growing Indigent Population. If we could change that to include special populations,
What page
including
is that? I'm sorry.
is under trends, you go up, and it's right there. That.
Number 7.
This one?
Yes, so, we're talking about the indigent population, but maybe we need to be a little more specific as far as special populations. I know this morning we talked about, undocumented, I represent the disability community, people with disabilities, but there could be other special populations, victims of domestic violence or trauma. So I think that that's also an issue because we're not really addressing it and we're seeing a growing need for services.
Okay. So with this, you want us to rephrase this statement to include special needs?
Special population.
We can
Special-
stay with that, just add special needs, and or special needs.
Okay, after population and or special needs. Okay. Okay. Any other trends? Okay, now we move on to assets. Again, keep in mind that this is general in nature. It's not specific to any single agency or jurisdiction. But also keep in mind that if, for example, I can give you an example like the special response team that might be housed, for example, in the city of McAllen, might be a regional team, that would be considered a regional asset that would cover the 3-county area. So that would make perfect sense to include here. But these are the ones that are listed currently. And if anybody has any additions to make, we'll take them right now.
Wouldn't you add as assets your educational facilities,
Okay?
your universities, your,
The universities, the colleges, is that education facilities is an asset.
it's right, it's educational institutions, it's right there. It's a funded training.
Okay?
There's also
Ms. Salinas, would that cover your statement right there? What I highlighted?
Well, maybe I'm misreading the assets here. To me, a workforce is an asset. You have a young workforce, the young population, which is a plus. But then I'm looking at facilities. When you have infrastructure, we have the ports there, the airports, all of that. But
Public
would you
education.
consider that your educational facilities and infrastructure? That's an asset.
Public institutions of higher learning?
There you go, perfect.
Okay, put that on there. Public institutions of higher learning, that will cover colleges and universities.
Yes.
Say that again, please. Say that again, ma'am.
Public institutions of higher learning,
Public and private?
Sure.
That's fine.
Public and private.
Mama, what's the difference between what you just said and what you just highlighted?
That was my question, if this would cover
Yeah,
that statement or not.
What's the difference between institutes of higher learning and availability for educational?
Well, I think what she's alluding to is the infrastructure of the buildings available on the school institution of higher learning. And then as asset, they're available to provide open resources for them.
Okay.
I mean, that's how I would differentiate.
Question,
Question?
I have a question. I don't know if it's specific or maybe it's off topic, but I'm Brooke Hernandez from Vail, same as I work with Melissa. And we focus on deaf services. Okay, so my concern is here in the valley, there are many deaf people who are still like looking for jobs, and there's not anything that's like permitted for them. So the deaf, they get SSI benefits because, they have a disability and they're indigent. So they stay, at home and they get their checks, for most of their lives. They really does that. So, I'm like, maybe like to motivate them to get a job and I know that the disabilities, they're disabled, they know that they can work. Same as security. But I'm concerned about maybe the companies here in the valley, they don't give them the opportunities to work, from their companies. With the deaf, they keep applying for jobs all over, through Vail and through Daughters, and, the Department of Health and Rehabilitating Health and Services, and the workforce, and all these different agencies, but, they're just not successful. I have people from more than 1 year that are waiting to get a job and they're not working. So we need to add maybe educating the companies, and to help people who are deaf and have disabilities to include them in their workforce. Same as the hearing, because it would help improve the valley a whole lot. It's just a really bad situation.
Okay.
Maybe
A challenge? Yes, ma'am.
Couldn't that go under amended training workforce? Because I know that at STC we do some specific training and job placement.
What section are you on in?
Right there, number A, under human resources.
Okay.
Could we be specific and add a bullet to it or something?
C?
Or a C for special needs?
Okay.
Special needs training and work availability.
Special needs training and work availability? Is-
I think.
Yeah, but really, I just don't like, maybe the wording for people with special needs. Like, I just don't like that label, I don't consider myself disabled, I'm just deaf.
Any recommendation?
That's the that word for me, not really special needs.
That's
different
excludes
from
other people.
people, because it's like, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
we could figure it out and change it so that it includes everybody's.
Okay. Any recommendations?
Yes.
So she has a recommendation.
How does this functional needs, because that includes everybody that has any kind of a need from the ability to do, that cannot do work.
Okay, so item C, functional needs. Is that fine? Okay.
Now, if people don't understand that,
Then you bullet it.
can you put like an example of deaf or special needs?
Okay.
So they can say that. Because functional needs, believe me, you'll see some other people say, what does that mean?
Now, this can also include re-entry of prisoners that, they're trying to re-enter into the community.
Okay.
So it could be people with disabilities, it could be, reentry prisoner, it could be for any type of population.
Okay. As an example, we'll put that under that.
Alcohol and drug addict.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
hard
but
for
we
them to
have-
find a job.
Yeah, we have training all the time.
Example, deaf, that's one,
Okay.
special needs.
Wheelchair, whatever you think.
Manuel,
Just,
if they want to fill out the form to establish a new goal,
Yes,
maybe this is something that we can turn into Terry,
okay,
under economic development.
okay. Yes, that's the same form that I talked about earlier. If you want to establish or create a new goal that's specific, we could fill one of those pages out, and we'll get it to the right program to incorporate it into their section of the plan.
So would that be one here?
Okay, under challenges. I know there has been some this morning that were added. Unfortunately, they're not here because each program director has to start from the beginning to within their program. Again, for me, it would be criminal justice and homeland security. Any challenges relating to those programs. So if anybody can think of anything else that can be added in here under challenges, yes.
It'll be the same under bullet number 4, access to comprehensive healthcare services for the economically disadvantaged. You need to include also for special populations as well.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, and again, if for those of you that might not be thinking of anything right now under trends and challenges, use that same piece of paper, and in the back, that blank form in the back, you can put trends or challenges and write them on there and leave it with us so we can add it and incorporate it at a later date. Yes?
Wouldn't one of the challenges be border issues?
Okay, the challenges, border-related issues.
Which is like immigration, influx, violence. Because, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, well, we don't even have border violence in that. So I don't know if a challenge would be, my voice is kind of loud.
I don't know if the challenge would be like she says, Cookie says, new border issues, and then put violence, influx, immigration, because just today, look at how they've changed the term from immigration issue to now humanitarian issue. So that's gonna be facing, because we're here, they're coming here. We're the ones that have that issue. We can't
Okay.
house them, we don't know where to put them. So that's a big challenge for us here.
Okay, so we'll include border-related issues, and then examples would be
Like
violence, immigration.
Increased immigration, yeah,
Okay.
whatever they're calling it.
Even communication across.
International communication. Okay, anyone else? Going once, twice? Moving on. Okay, from here on out, we're gonna discuss the actual goals. And again, the first one that we have is the criminal justice program. With this program, we'll get straight into the goals. As you can see, there's quite a bit of goals. One that I will point out right off the bat, that more than likely, unless you disagree, will be removed from this section would be the last goal. Deliver the basic peace officer certification course to those in the region who wish to become peace officers at competitive market rates. That because I don't know if you're aware, but the police academy has its own section, so that will be either incorporated on there. I think it might already be there, but I'll contact the director to see if we can incorporate that in his section, unless you all see different, and I want to leave it in the criminal justice section.
Why would you put in both?
And both? Okay. We'll do that. Okay, so the goals, and again, these are the goals that are in this section. Any new goals, objectives, and so on, that you can use that blank sheet of paper to create that goal, and you can hand it to us at the end of this session, and we'll incorporate and get later on get with you to if we need any further information to create that section or that particular goal, the information for that goal. So what we have here for the criminal justice goals is reduce drug and human trafficking and human smuggling, reduce drug-related crimes or crime, increase alcohol and drug prevention, reduce violent crime, reduce high dropout rates for middle and high school students, reduce juvenile crime, increase technology for public safety, reduce child abuse and neglect, and enhance security and courthouse safety, establish mental health and mental disability centers, establish public safety intelligence gathering and sharing resources to reduce local gang violence. And the last one we just covered. Any accomplishments? These accomplishments, the last time that this plan was put together was 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago. So if there's any new accomplishments, not only through the COG, but you as an agency that have accomplished throughout this past year and a half, I'd like your input at this point in time. So if anybody has any goals that they met or accomplishments that they attained, please, yes.
So we are not mentioned on the enhancing staff victim services, and we have the victims of
Crime prevention program, so we need to be added on there.
Okay, and added is what title?
As the Rio Grande Valley Empowerment Zone.
Okay. Rio Grande Valley Empowerment Zone, that would be under accomplishments, the second paragraph, right?
Yes.
And then on the increased technology on the first one, would that be radios, AFIS?
All of that stuff?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
then you can add Alamo, because we just got our APHIS phase 1 and 2 funded.
Okay, Alamo, we're gonna add that on there.
What's it called?
APHIS, the automatic fingerprint system.
It's an acronym for,
Automatic fingerprint identification systems. That's a trivia question, by the way.
no, I just, a lot of times people put acronyms and
Yes.
first.
I just, we need to put the word first and then that.
Yes. Did you get that, Ms. Word first, Michael?
On accomplishments, also, the Cameron County Veterans Treatment Court was established a few months ago.
Where would you like to insert that
Well,
second?
that's accomplishments, right?
Yes.
Is it a program?
It's a court.
So treatment for the victim, it's a service agency?
Okay, the second paragraph?
If it's not counted, it's
Also, on the criminal justice codes, I am not sure if we're in compliance with the number of law enforcement officers per county or per city or whatever.
Mhm.
But we should increase law enforcement officers. I'm told that usually we are not, we don't have a large number of officers. I think for Cameron County, if I'm not mistaken, it's approximately about 130 law enforcement officers that we have for the entire county. I don't know Hidalgo or the other counties.
Okay. Could you write
I'd
that?
like to increase,
Could-
law enforcement officers on the criminal justice goals.
Okay, could you write that on the blank form? Because that's a new goal that we need to create. And so just hand it to us at the end and we'll get with you.
Okay.
Or unless when we're done with the criminal justice section, unless you see anything that is related to that, because these are just the goals, the actual details are coming here in a bit. And so if you don't see anything that's relevant to your statement there, we'll get with you and create that additional goal.
I think Hidalgo County has also established a veterans court
Yes.
with one of the judges being specifically involved in just veterans cases.
Okay, so Cameron Hidalgo Veterans Court. Go ahead and put that in the second paragraph. Any more accomplishments? Not, we'll move on. First goal, and you have that, the goals each go in front of you, so if you have any changes, I'm just going to read off the goal, the objective headings, and they go into the measurable outcomes, strategies, and potential resources. So the first goal is to reduce drug and human trafficking and human smuggling. And the objective is to conduct specialized training for law enforcement agencies to include intelligence sharing. For those that might not know, this has become a major hot topic here within the last few months, especially after today or yesterday when the governor announced that it's going to start focusing his assets on human trafficking and specifically. Because as you may recall, or maybe preview to see, with the whole drug violence we have across the border, there's been the numbers have increased dramatically in both human and drug trafficking. And so for those of you that travel up and down the valley, you've seen an overwhelming force of law enforcement agencies, not only local police officers, but we also have state DPS have pretty much manned up more forces here in the valley, as well as Border Patrol. So it's an overwhelming increase of law enforcement, but still, this is also, as law enforcement agencies increase, the numbers increase, this also increase. And not to mention that with the funding reductions, that ties into our local law enforcement agencies, state and federal. And so as we lose funding, priorities or tasks are relocated or reassigned to some other project. And so this increases both drug and human trafficking. And so, any information that you would like for me to add under the objective section, let me know.
Is that section only to reduce, where does the human trafficking victims fall into?
Because that's only for law enforcement. But once they start, all those programs that were awarded that are going to be addressing human trafficking, what's going to happen to the victims? We don't, like I said, we don't have a shelter to house human trafficking victims. There's where, I mean, as victim service providers, we're faced on a daily basis having to lose victims, and then the DA's office is not prosecuting the cases because they don't have a victim. So it affects the victim service providers as well and the court system, not just law enforcement.
Can we possibly add it under strategies? Add a statement under strategies?
Because once they're being identified, then what's going to happen to them? We have to provide the supportive services and continue the service until the cases get prosecuted.
Okay. Can you give me an example of what statement to add under strategies?
So, but my question was, are we going to put it here, or are we going to put it on the violent crime section?
Or
To address victims?
I think, unless you all think otherwise, it can go in both.
In both?
Yeah, because this is unique to drug and human trafficking.
Right.
And then victim services
Yes.
ties, it's the next phase
Right.
to that.
So we
So
can add it on both.
on both, I think, unless anybody else thinks different.
Where would the different, well, let me start again. Where would the the recent issue that just came up on these children that are just crossing. I think it was an article in the paper yesterday. And I know it's an immigration problem, but does it fit under human trafficking and human smuggling also? But these children are crossing, and there's tons of them that are coming, and they don't know what to do with them. We've got them on the side, and it's a big issue. It's first one I've seen that has so many children, and they said the youngest one was 3 years old. There was a 5-year-old, and then there's more. There was a big article in the newspaper and on television last night. And how do we deal with that? That's also criminal justice.
Well, that's why I'm talking about the need for a shelter, because there's nowhere to place them. There's no facilities. The ones that are currently being used are already overcrowded.
Yes.
I mean, we don't have another shelter. So
Is that why they're releasing?
that's why they're releasing them, but the problem with that is that the trafficking victims are not being identified and they're just being released, so the crime continues to happen because nobody's being held responsible for it.
But that is not a human trafficking, right? It's just people crossing.
Well, because human smuggling is one thing, it's the smuggling of the humans, but then in those group of stash houses or people that are being found, there's people that are being victimized that can be human trafficking victims, but they're not being identified because there's no manpower, there's no resources, there's no program. So all they're doing is detaining them and sending them to wherever it is for releasing them.
Okay.
So, and the reason they're doing that is because there's nowhere to put it.
But if
We
you
don't
look
have-
at the objective here is to conduct specialized training.
Yeah.
Well, how can a shelter be a strategy? Are we going to, do you understand what I mean? Look at the objective on this one. I understand what you mean on the shelter for housing. But for here, this is saying that we're conducting specialized training for law enforcement agencies.
Well, that's why I was asking him if we're gonna put it there for the victim. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and to me, it's the victim, because here, what is the shelter, are we gonna have to train, you want money to also train the shelter staff? I mean, because of the human trafficking issue, I mean, it can fall,
Actually, it's just like number, the bullet number 2, funds to establish court, funds to establish a shelter. Simple as that.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
Yeah, that's why
comment.
I was asking, are we gonna put it there, or are we gonna be specific to housing victims of violent crime, or just funds to establish a shelter, and it's gonna be on those sections? That was my initial question.
well,
I could have been deciding this.
to me would be under victims, because here it's not, they're already caught, they're already being processed, right? You need a place once they've been through the system to hold them, right?
But this
Well, we're
says
talking-
human trafficking, I think that's where she's coming from.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, to add another bullet and put it in there, because we're talking about human trafficking victims specifically. Right? Is that not what I'm understanding?
Under strategies, you can, but also just focus on the objective 2 is conduct specialized training for law enforcement agencies to include intelligence sharing. So it's, I think, more along the lines of
More enforcement than actual detaining and rights or.
correct. It's more geared to the law enforcement officials to provide them either service or training, specialized training to deal with issues such as the one you stated. So would that be,
Yes, that explains to me putting that under training to specifically train law enforcement on,
so that's the bullet, right?
right,
Provide or establish, provide training to law enforcement.
provide training to law enforcement. Well, it's already there. It's there. No, is it? Oh, that's reports.
This is increased training for law enforcement.
I would just include the funds to establish shelter, and potential resources will be service providers.
Okay. Is that good, Rosie? Is that,
Yeah, that's.
Because the other one is going to cover a little bit more specific on the prevention or education, awareness, and providing any type of direct services on the other
Okay, let's put it in there for now, and then as we go further in the next goals, maybe it'll,
Funds to establish emergency shelter services to victims of human trafficking.
sounds good. And also, I forgot to mention, if you have the handouts, these handouts, go ahead and feel free to write on them. And if you make an addition or deletion, make sure you write your name on top and hand it to us at the end of the session. That way we can collect the correct information that you're trying to include in the plan. Yes.
I would recommend adding, if it's providing funding services, and the mechanism for providing the services as well, because I don't think that mechanism really exists at this time.
Okay, can you state that again, please?
She's asking for funding for working with the population that's being affected by this, but also we need a mechanism. It's a defined mechanism on how to deal with that.
Provide funding and a mechanism to provide,
Assistance to victims of crime, the associated.
I don't understand.
Okay. Your strategy was to provide,
Funds for a shelter.
she wants sheltering, but she wants funding assistance. But how are you going to provide that assistance? Where are you going to provide it? Who's going to provide it? That's the mechanism side of it they're referencing.
Although we can't make it specific to an agency.
no, it has to be,
Just funds to
yes.
establish.
Okay, so we'll add that bullet and the strategies, and then we'll get with you, Rosie, to try to make it a more broad statement that would cover the 3-county area. Potential resources, are we missing any agencies? It's general, pretty general. Local, state, and federal law enforcement, and advocacy centers? Yes.
I don't know if it's legal or not. Sometimes when they have victims assistance programs through the state, that they go through the police office, the police departments, and people that have been victims can apply for that. Why couldn't maybe some of the people that have been caught that are actually smuggling some of these people, why couldn't they be responsible for fines to help fund these programs?
Yeah, that would have to be taken to legislative and try and find,
You're talking about,
that will.
Cookie, you're talking about smugglers?
The human traffic group.
Yes. Well, that, for law enforcement, if there's any law enforcement here, please feel free to comment if I'm on a line or you can contribute to this. But once, go ahead, sir, in the back.
She's referring to what they call a U visa. But U visa, usually those are for witnesses and homicides. The suspect needs to be in custody, usually for violent crimes.
But it could be this, if you're a victim, like if you're, because I know that,
You're talking about the fines, I know that they're done.
because when I was at PSJ, when I had people that had been victims of process, some of their services, like mental health services, through the victims' service facilities. I'm just wondering if, it may, because they do catch some of the bad dudes sometime, right? If they could be fined and have to pay some kind of restitution,
Mhm.
they could go into this kind of funding.
Well, I think
That's,
that's,
because it is victims.
Well, once they catch a human trafficker, he's an actual criminal. It's a crime that's being committed, right?
Right.
The problem is with the state statute, it's so broad that I can have the evidence in the back of my car, as long as I'm not hiding, I'm not evading, if I pull over, it's not criminal offense. I have to be actually hiding. That's why it's, it's a little broad term, kind of makes it difficult for us. That's why we turn everything over to U.S. Border Patrol.
Okay.
And we hope that they prosecute the smugglers, that they get so backlogged that it's hard for them to
Mhm.
Well, it's not harboring anymore. Victims have victims' rights, and the shelter is only for victims. They have the right to stay here when they've been victimized in the United States, so we're not harboring. All victims of violent crime have victims' rights that are protected, so it wouldn't be harboring. The shelter is only gonna be for victims, not for just anybody that's being smothered.
Okay.
In my head, it has to go under victim's crime, because here is strictly human smuggling.
Right.
And so, for victims, you're right, yeah, for victims, if the shelter's for victims that have already been of a crime, then it needs to go under victim services.
Yes.
Because here for human smuggling, if she's just saying we can't, we're gonna hold them, then we technically can, right? And so they've actually been identified as victims. Then they can be used to the shelter or whatever, you understand what I mean?
Yes.
Because they have to get processed first. And once they do the processing, then you find out where they smuggled, where they here, where they a victim, did they voluntarily do it? Because anybody who comes over, and I mean this with all due respect, can say I was smuggled. Well, you need to find that person, so they need to be processed to make sure that they are indeed a victim of crime. So in my head, that's why under this goal and objective, I can't see a shelter fitting in here specifically for victims, because they have to be processed before they become a victim. At least that's my head. Am I wrong?
Oh, you have to prove it right now.
Yeah, you have to prove that a crime happened, so.
Okay. And along those lines, also keep in mind that who's going to be taking on that responsibility? And maybe this is just a question for the audience, because if we establish shelters, just like emergency management for evacuation, the city or American Red Cross takes on that responsibility. But in this other aspect, and this is a question, so please, who would take on that responsibility to man that shelter, to make sure it's in compliance? First, to make sure it's in compliance, and to make sure nothing goes wrong, or a supervisor type of role. So that's the critical thing, whether to think about, or if you have any comments, we can take it on.
Well, I know that when we applied for the FEMA money for these safe house shelters, that was a very specific question, is that, okay, you're gonna have this shelter, when it becomes an emergency, who's gonna man it? That was a question from FEMA to us. We had to prove who was gonna staff it, who was gonna be responsible, who's gonna open, who's gonna close, everything for an emergency shelter. That's what FEMA asks us when we're applying for funding. Okay, so that's exactly what we need to think of. If we want a shelter, we have to have those answers before we even put it down that we want funding for it. Because then when somebody's gonna apply for a shelter, they're gonna get funding, and then it's gonna open, and then they don't have anybody to man it. Or it's gonna be a facility that's not gonna be utilized 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You know what I mean? Then you're gonna start thinking, well, why didn't we give them money to build this?
But they
I have a question.
we do. We already provide victim services, and we're already,
So you're wanting for your organization a shelter.
well, not just for our organization, for victims of crime.
Exactly, but y'all would be responsible for manning it 24/7.
We get funded for it, yes, but anybody can apply for it. It would be an open venture to it, any victim service provider. And whoever gets the funding would manage it.
It's the
That's
same
how
as,
the grants are. And
Right,
then,
I'm a grant writer, so I know that.
and then at that point, if it is funded, then they would hire personnel to staff the shelter and run it 24/7, because emergency shelters never close. Right, unless they come.
we want to get technical, just look at the bullet number 2 of that strategy. It covers establishing courts.
Right.
Obviously, courts needs manpower and bailiffs and everybody that they can manage reporters. So it's simple as that, to hire prosecutors to prosecute the case. Well, the same thing is establish a particular shelter that includes support staff. I mean, that's establish funds to hire and train staff for the shelter.
But I think when we made this strategy, this was like 2 years ago, I remember we had this conversation in Edinburgh. And there was somebody from the district attorney's office who put this there because they want specialized courts for just human trafficking and human smuggling cases. That's what this means. They want a specialized court. And I remember we had the whole conversation because she was like, we need special prosecutors that deal with human trafficking. We need special this, special that.
Well,
That's why that's there.
Well, let me give you an example. Stark County DA called us and said, hey, we have a victim of sexual assaults, human trafficking. I need a shelter because I need what he was calling about it, I need the evidence right now. If I let it go and the ICE takes it, I can't prosecute the case. So what does she calls Mujeres Unidas and says, hey, do you have any room available right now, at least temporarily for the next 72 hours? So the prosecutor can go and get the information that is needed to prosecute the case. And then perhaps conduct a U visa temporarily right away. They need a shelter, absolutely. They need a prosecutor aspect of the enforcement. Once they do it, are they cooperating? What he said to them about the visas, and where are they going to take it after that? If they don't cooperate, the evidence of what that particular assault, I mean, we're going to just spin wheels. Now, we're going to do the enforcement of human trafficking. I'd rather we're going to go after the bad guy, which is a trafficker. And it eliminates a whole bunch of process of the actual victim on the conversation. Instead of trafficking that encompasses a whole bunch of things.
And again, I guess for the sake of discussion, good comments overall, but such as item number 2, bullet number 2, what you're proposing, could it be attainable in the near future? Let's say 2 years from now, even 4 years from now?
Yeah.
To actually getting funding for a shelter?
Yeah. I'm not saying today because it's going to take a lot.
And it's a process, and you know, but the reality of the things that are happening right now is that we are having a lot of human smuggling cases that are resulting in sexual assault victims. That's on a daily basis, and if you're a victim service provider, you know that because we deal with it on a daily basis. Now, out of all those people that are there are human trafficking victims that are being sold and prostituted, that are being forced into slavery, that are being kidnapped and extorted. That is human trafficking. They do not fit the profile of a victim of family violence. They need long-term emergency shelter because those cases take forever to prosecute. And you're talking about victims that are coming from Central America that don't have any family ties to the valley, that cannot go live with a family member. And if we send them to wherever they're going, let's say New York, California, we lose the victim and the prosecution fails. So there's no case. And that's what's happening every day.
Most of the time, we don't have a suspect. We get DNA, and we have to sit there and hope for he goes to prison someday, so CODIS gets a hit. It could be 10 years before we ever get a suspect, but if he's a Mexican national, the government of Mexico doesn't help out. He's smuggled from Mexico, goes back to Mexico. The odds are, we will never see light of day in prosecution. Right. It's sad to say I've been doing this 16 years, and I've yet to make a case of a rape from that happened in the brush or smuggling.
So what happens to the victim? You can't house them forever.
We can't house a victim for, I mean, if we don't have any evidence, something go on right away, what is that we can do? We can keep the case open, but we're not gonna get a DNA match until we have a positive ID. Now when we have a positive ID, we have a victim.
So then,
You know, they place themselves in harm, and it hurts us because it hampers us from completing a complete investigation.
so the victim is released and this is from your shelter?
Right, but we assist them with the new visa process, and even if there's no prosecution, the law enforcement agency can certify that there was an act of crime committed against this person. So even though it wasn't prosecuted, the law enforcement agency can certify new visa certifications and will take care of the whole immigration process for them. And then they get a permit, they go wherever it is that they're going.
Unfortunately, if we start giving you visas out for every rape, it's going to cost.
Well, we cannot, we don't have the power to do it now. We do the process, but immigration does a review, and there's only 10,000 new visas deliberations and approve it.
Okay, let's think about this real quick. Maybe this also, it'll capture your needs as well as the groups. Maybe for this, because it's focused on training, maybe seek funding to secure shelter management that houses special victims.
Well, if this section is only for human trafficking, you can put human trafficking victims, because it's
Okay.
only talking about,
Or that.
yes.
Is that fine?
Yeah.
And then we'll go into the crimes, the violent crimes, we'll add the shelter information,
Right.
okay? Okay, just remind me when we get to it, so I won't forget. Okay, the second one is reduce drug-related crimes. And the objective is to establish/enhance multi-agency drug enforcement task force. Okay, you have the objective paragraph. Any changes, additions to that? And we move on to the measurable outcomes. And these, of course, these goals have to be measured, measurable outcomes, but also keep in mind that the numbers are not that high. They're very reserved. For the size of the region, I think we surpass some of these percentages. But if you want to stick to the same ones and maybe look at this 2 years from now, when we revise the plan and come up with different percentages, we can do that as well.
During the council.
Okay, the strategies. Seek and secure additional funding to provide opportunities with specialized training to include intelligence sharing, funds to establish drug courts, and to hire prosecutors to prosecute drug-related crimes, and secure additional funding resources for youth substance abuse programs and criminal justice, the CCH data entry awareness to ensure requirements meet state and federal regulations and mandates. Any additional strategies? Anybody wants to add? Okay, the potential resources pretty much covers all local, state, and federal law enforcement. Rio Grande Valley Council.
But that should be on there, I think.
What's that?
Palmer drug abuse, because they provide free, Palmer drug abuse should be on there because they provide free services.
You said Palmer drug abuse?
Program for that.
Yeah, okay.
The RGV council has changed its name. I think they're now the council. So you might want to ask somebody from Rio Grande Valley Council. They just had a name change.
Okay, Rio Grande Valley Council. Okay, we're gonna take a 2-minute break. They need to change, I guess, batteries. So 2 minutes. The next goal we're gonna cover is increase alcohol and drug prevention. The objective is to reduce incidents of alcohol and substance abuse in the community. And the objective is to inform the public of existing resources to address alcohol and drug prevention, to reduce the increase of underage drinking and youth-related substance abuse. Measurable outcomes. Any changes?
Right, can't read that fast.
in her strategies, speaking on the disability population. A lot of programs lack the accessibility, especially with our deaf population, and sometimes even with other populations that need more one-to-one. So we need to make our programs a little more accessible. It's very hard for us to find like resources to send people to free drug programs when they can't provide interpreters or extend treatment for someone who has like a low comprehension level.
Okay.
Believe me, it's hard to find it for anybody. I'm just.
So what do you want me to put in your strategy? Just to make the programs more accessible.
Call me.
Cookie. Okay, any additional strategies? Potential resources?
Is that on there?
No. No, PADAP? Yes.
Well, it says in all other alcohol, so that's a large, this would be specific, but on the top it says MAD and all other alcohol and drug prevention programs in the rural and
Okay,
Say that again?
yes.
Yes.
Could that be repeated? I didn't hear.
Oh,
It's already included in there where it reads potential resources, and it says MAD and all other alcohol and drug prevention programs in the Laurel Grande Valley. So pretty much they're encompassing any programs that are available that are providing alcohol and drug prevention.
Does MHMR still provide any services?
What's that, Cookie, say again?
MHMR, do they still exist?
Tropical Texas Behavioral Health.
Yeah.
I-
Well, not behavioral health. Tropical Texas.
They provide very,
MHMR.
very limited, but
Yeah.
I would probably leave that as a question and then ask Tropical Texas Behavioral Health for that.
Okay.
But this is just prevention, right? Prevention. It's not intervention services, this is just prevention services.
Well, but something like, if you read on the strategy number 7, it says create an awareness program on prescription drug abuse.
The mental health population, there's a high incidence of prescription drug abuse. Also synthetic drugs, energy drinks. So I mean, it can be very broad, but we can include that because they're also having to regulate some of the drugs that they issue out to their patients.
We'll verify Tropical Texas to see what kind of services they provide. And if they do tie into this, we'll add them as a resource. Okay, the next goal is to reduce violent crime. The objective is to provide victims with a multidisciplinary team for investigations, therapy, counseling, and treatment services.
This is for your record.
It's a quite extensive paragraph. I'll give you a little bit of time to go over it. If you have any changes to make, let me know.
Where it says provide assistance to victims of sexual abuse, family violence, and added the human trafficking bills. On the second sentence, it's the second sentence, provide assistance to victims of sexual abuse and family violence. Can you add, human trafficking?
Okay.
Sexual abuse, family violence,
So should we provide assistance to victims of sexual abuse, comma, family violence,
And human trafficking
comma, and human trafficking
victims.
victims?
Of victims.
Okay, any more changes? Moving on to the measurable outcomes for this specific goal are to apply for and operate programs that provide direct and/or referral services to victims of all types of violent crime, install security systems in facilities used for providing victims assistance and other criminal justice related services, increase the number of victims provided with services by 10%, increase the number of facilities, i.e. facilities used for providing victim assistance and other criminal justice related services with operational functioning security systems. Okay, and again, the percentages are not that high. And again, if we want to leave the same percentages, we can. And in 2 years from now, we'll look at this and maybe consider increasing that. Okay, the strategies. I have a long list of strategies. Again, I'll give you a little bit of time to go over these. And again, keep in mind that if you see any strategies that are no longer relevant to the goal and the objective, we need to remove them.
We have to have a strategy if we include the human trafficking.
Going back to the discussion we had earlier, is this where the sheltering for human trafficking would fit in?
Where it says establish individual housing support groups for victims, just add human trafficking there also. Where it says sexual assault and family violence.
Okay. So after sexual assault, comma, human trafficking?
Family violence and
Got it?
You know, that housing could also be, just a quick comment. There's a session tomorrow, and she brought up a point
that I'm looking at on the strategic plan, but we could even address that emergency shelter under the housing section tomorrow at 10. Because there is a goal here that says provide adequate and accessible emergency shelter, and that's very broad goal. So you might want to look at that if you can't come tomorrow and provide feedback.
And then right there where it says furnish, I think it would be provide housing alternatives, not furnish housing.
Which one was it?
Where it says furnish housing alternatives for victims.
Here?
I mean, I think better word would be provide housing alternatives.
Okay. Get that?
you're not getting it.
wouldn't it be provide family violence and human
Human
trafficking?
trafficking.
Okay, provide housing alternatives for victims of family violence and human trafficking.
Yeah.
Well, you could just take off family and just put violence.
Or providing victims of violent crime.
Yeah, that's,
Victims of violence.
yeah.
So back to work, you work.
Okay, before we move on, again, state that.
Provide housing alternatives for victims of violent crime.
Okay, just like that. Get it?
That way it's not general to just one specific crime.
Robert? Which one?
That goes the one that you were earlier, where it says, establish individual counseling support for children, adult children, homicidal counseling, or homicidal grief.
Add that, homicidal grief, after sexual assault?
No, you could put sexual assault and family violence, or homicidal grief,
Okay.
or specialized counseling.
So specialized or?
Homicidal.
Yeah.
I thought it put human trafficking there. We put
Yeah, it's
sexual assault, family violence, human trafficking, and
homicidal grief.
Okay.
homicidal. So that was the next one.
Grief.
Brief.
Okay, moving on.
Now, but is this one we're gonna put the established emergency shelter? We're gonna leave it on the.
We can add it here. Do you remember what it was?
My only concern about keep adding the shelters on all of these is when it comes to funding, and when we submit our grants, if somebody submits $100,000, $200,000 for a shelter, and all that money's gonna go to them, instead of
What,
anybody else.
yeah,
in there.
I'll-
So in my head, the way the funding's been set up and these strategies, when you're a grant writer, shelter should stay under housing, at least in my head. Because then you can only go after one pile of money. Because in my head, if you put it everywhere, then anybody through any program, violence, criminal justice, homeland security, there's a need for this housing and this shelter, there is. But in my opinion, I don't think it should be put in every one of the strategies. Because then you can apply for one shelter for every kind of situation.
The good thing about it is that there's checks and balances, that's why you have a committee that scores, and it's up to the committee. If you score high, that's
Well,
what
I
they
get
want, that's
that,
what they
but
want.
in my head, I don't think that we should put a shelter for every different crime. A shelter for victims, a shelter for for human smugglers. We're gonna do a shelter to help with everything that all these strategies do, then it should go under the housing. Apply, this is where you can get money. At least in my head. Because you know how they're limiting.
No, when you speak about the housing, you're talking about the session for tomorrow, right?
Yes.
Now, go ahead, I'll get back to you in a minute.
I just want to make a comment that if you did review the strategic plan ahead of time, there is a section in the housing that for tomorrow, and it does have a goal where it says provide adequate and accessible emergency shelter. And then along those terms, it says provide emergency shelter during disaster declarations and unforeseen issues. So what I would suggest is those unforeseen issues, if you want to define them, then tomorrow provide that feedback. But I think that's where it needs to go is here because, we put it in here, but it fits more the housing because this is for emergency shelter availability. And we do have an emergency because you can't, she's doing victim services and then human trafficking. Not all human traffickers are, victims of violent crime, so you can't really mix them. But I think you need to put it under housing. It's just my opinion.
Well, I'm just gonna suggest, if you have any opinions, do some research, empirical research, review the literature. We can dissect the definition of what means what, and look at what FEMA's goal is all about, Homeland Security is all about in general, and then how the Victims of Violent Crime Act, because it's a pass-through of funds from the state to us, and it tells you specifically there on the prioritization on it, because we're never going to agree to a particular area and where it falls in the continuum of all these services, but just look at the intent of the act of each particular one, and then do the research and put it in there instead of how we spin it, because we all have an agenda, and the agenda is to fit in, and those goals and strategies and how, once I commit as a grant writer, like she says, is to submit your proposal so I can get funding. But the reality, the strategic plan encompasses everybody. And how you get there if one person in Cameron County does the established center for victims of violent crime, fantastic, we have something. What we're saying is, we don't have nothing, the closest is San Antonio. And we're trying to establish something here. So, who takes the lead?
Robert, one of the things I would like to say, because I was a consultant for HUD for many years, I've written multiple grants for them. And when I hear housing, the first thing I think of is HUD and housing authorities. If these people are indigent and if these people are new to our country, they have no means to go into housing. Even into, I mean, we established some emergency rooms, but in reality, they don't have any funds to live in housing.
The criteria.
Right.
The criteria under HUD does not allow for that.
The criteria, if you don't have any pots and pans and you don't have any sheets and you don't have anything, I mean, we've established a few rooms that have made that possible in the grants that I've written. But you only have one. You don't have enough for an army that we're seeing coming across the border at this point. So I think that is probably why they're talking about more of a shelter as opposed to housing specifically. Like, in my head, I don't know if that's what she's addressing, but housing to me is like HUD.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to touch on. This session for tomorrow, I'm going to need Mr. Jones to comment on this, if he can interject as far as the housing is concerned. The housing for tomorrow, the session it deals with hurricane relief housing, not necessarily victims of crime. Am I correct, Mr. Jones, at this point in time?
Yes, but depending on the discussions, it does need to be added in. So there's some cross-reference between some of the categories that would be more than justified. That's what the folks feel would be important. So.
Okay, so it can be added on the housing section?
Sure.
Okay. All right. And for the criminal justice section, now keep in mind that, again, like it was mentioned, this is a regional view of that. And you know, keep in mind also that the criminal justice program itself has an additional regional strategic plan that outlines the priorities that are going to be funded, not necessarily in order from 1 to 10 per se, but as a whole. Now, for this coming year, we're going to be doing the same thing, and for this coming year, the state has pushed out to us that we have to prioritize projects. They can't be just left on the table. For example, 10 projects, everybody can apply for whatever they want. Because of the decrease in funding, we are going to have to prioritize projects. And we sort of kind of did this last year because we looked at the community plans that are currently in place with each of the counties and took the projects that targeted at least 2 of the counties. And if they did, we included it in the strategic plan. Now, in addition to that, the state also has its own funding priorities. And some of the COGs mirrored those priorities, some COGs didn't. And that comes about because how can the state determine our priorities? How do they know the region? They're not that in tune with the region. They're a state agency. You know, they know we need funding, but it's up to the local regions or COGs or even jurisdictions to identify their own priorities. So just because it's written does not mean it's going to be funded. Okay?
I wanted to say something about funding, since we were talking about shelters and the funding. The shelter funding for, let's say, domestic violence, those can come out of community development funds. If you're within the city, they have discretionary funding also and can be used for construction or acquisition of land or a facility. That's for that type of shelter. Now, the safe room or the shelter for emergency disasters is actually comes from FEMA. And that one is through the mitigation grant funding. And in order to do that, there has to be a presidential declaration. It doesn't have to be in your community, it can be anywhere in Texas, and it can be used. But that's the only time that I'm aware of that you can go after that funding. The most recent one that was awarded a so-called safe room was Denton, Texas for 1.6 million. There is a match requirement. So your county or your city, if they're going to apply, has to be able to put up a big chunk of money, which is about 25%. If FEMA will pay 75%. And that's where that is in the difference of the shelters. So they cannot be grouped together as different types of funding.
Yeah, and a good thing you brought that up because that got me thinking of yes, it's through grant funding, the hazard mitigation grant program. After a certain point in time, maybe 3 years, maybe even 5 years, that asset belongs to that applicant, to whether it's the county or the jurisdiction. So maybe it's already in the works. Maybe that by building these shelters, so-called disaster relief shelters, can be used in conjunction with human trafficking, or victims
Not
of.
really, not in domestic violence.
No, I'm saying after the grant requirements are in, or after the grant period ends, typically, like a piece of equipment, once it ends, it's the jurisdiction's responsibility.
The ones for domestic violence have a very different criteria because they have security. Not everybody under the sun has to know where they're located. So that's a very, you wouldn't want a building that everybody knows where it's at. So.
I just want to elaborate on the grants that we're applying. It's unallowable to build construction. What we're using the funds for is to support and hire the staff to manage the building or manage wherever they're going to be located.
Okay.
Even if I come and I say I need a shelter as a priority and I apply for the shelter, it's a denial. It's a complete unallowable cost for construction on that purpose. So
Good point.
So
There's-
I mean, the whole purpose of us having to put this as in criminal justice is because, as you know, Manuel, you are not allowed to apply under Homeland Security for victim services. We have to apply under criminal justice. And the emergency shelter services are included in there. We're not allowed to ask for money to build or construct a shelter, but we are allowed to ask for support services for the shelter services for the victims that are being housed there, not to actually build a shelter.
and as you know, the committee is going to ask you the sustainability.
Yeah.
And if you don't answer the correct sustainability question, they're going to deny you the proposal. So, we're just saying put it as a priority because there is a need.
Because the need is there. And most of the funding that you're talking about, like CDBG, HHC, you have to be established. You have to be a 1-year established shelter in order to be able to apply for those funds. So this would just be like to start off, and then there's additional funds that can be used through other grants to continue facilitating the services in the shelter. But you have to prove to the state that you're an established tenant.
Okay, so the strategy would not be to necessarily secure
So
funds.
we're not building, we're just establishing an emergency shelter to provide services, not building.
Okay.
Because there is not one.
Got it? Okay. All right, any more strategies? Potential resources? All local, state, and federal law enforcement neighborhood watch programs at school, children and adult advocacy centers, hospital districts, and faith-based organizations. The next goal is to reduce high dropout rates of middle and high school students. The objective is collaboration, sharing policies and best practices with all school districts throughout the LRGV region. Okay, the objective Any input? Moving on, measurable outcomes. And again, the percentages are somewhat conservative because, of course, we don't want to put something that might not be attainable within the next 2 years or even 4 years. So again, maybe we can revisit this again in 2 years and stay with the same percentages or increase them a little bit. Strategies, the strategy section. So basically, pretty much is acquire funding for to furnish juvenile services, juvenile prevention programs, community outreach programs.
Why would you have facilities there?
What section could
Why would you have under where it says acquire funding for youth facilities if this is dropout prevention? I think it's the last one.
The only thing I can think of is acquire funding for youth facilities,
Like Boys and Girls Clubs?
probably for that purpose. After school, yeah.
So maybe we word that.
Sure.
Because facilities, I think of like the Mario Ramirez Juvenile Detention Center.
That's what I'm thinking. So just change that up if, you know, YMCA or whatever, and Boys and Girls Clubs,
So, acquire
after school
funding
programs.
for youth.
Youth after school programs, is that?
For extracurricular youth activities. If it's
Or maybe like
such as
retention programs.
Such as Boys and Girls Clubs or something. Not funded, you know, just.
Yeah. Okay, so what's the consensus? Acquire funding for Boys and Girls Club and retention?
Just put such as. and
Such as, okay.
example.
After, so leave it as is and then put such as Boys and Girls Youth Club, Boys Club, right?
Yeah, because on your potential resource, we have youth centers. So, I mean, you could change facilities to centers. I don't know who the youth centers were as your resources.
Okay.
So you might want to
What-
maybe address it with youth centers.
Okay, we'll look into that. Put that in the research. Yeah, because that was, what we were talking about, I guess discussing was already at on the last bullet. After school educational and recreational programs. Potential resources, youth centers in all school districts in the Lower Ocam Valley, child advocacy centers, and local, state, and federal law enforcement. The next objective is reduce juvenile crime. Reduce juvenile related crime and drug use by identifying programs and training to help interdict the recruitment of youth into crime organizations. Objective. Any comments or changes? Okay, move on to measure outcomes.
that is being measured?
That's the number one question. The top question.
And there's someone who collects it.
It's quite a task to measure something that affects the entire region. So basically, the input that we get from these meetings is trying to determine how all these goals and objectives get measured. Basic information, there's just some percentages that are there.
Region 1. Here it says Region 1. Because Region 1 collects all that data on their payment reports. It would be important that you guys collaborate with them to get that information.
Okay. So collaboration with Region 1.
But wouldn't that be a strategy, not necessarily measurable outcome?
What to see where we stand as far as the percentages, at least for the ones that are listed on there, to see what their suggestions or ideas would be. If they're too minimal, or we can increase them slightly, maybe that at least have that collaboration with them. We'll do that. But that we'll put that under strategies as well. Collaboration with.
Because they're a resource here, right there.
Yes. Yes.
Well, but it could be for data collection.
Okay. So under strategies, collaboration with Region 1
For data collection.
for data collection. Data verification and collection. Okay, potential resources, all local, state, and federal law enforcement, youth centers, and all school districts in the Rio Grande Valley, Region 1 ESC. Anybody think of any other potential resources? Okay, the next goal is to enhance technology for public safety, continue to upgrade technology for law enforcement agencies. As you can see, this is very general. It ties into basically anything having to do with technology for public safety. So if you see any comments or any items that need to be changed or maybe added, please let me know. And the measurable outcomes for this specific goal are to create programs to provide current technology and equipment to law enforcement, prosecuting agencies, to keep law enforcement and social services agencies better prepared to utilize equipment and technology to its maximum capability. County and surrounding jurisdictions will be prepared and equipped to mitigate and respond to emergency calls for service. Strategies. Potential resources, all local, state, and federal law enforcement, county district attorney, county clerk, and/or district clerk's office in the Rio Grande Valley.
fits here or not, but, we have, I know I've seen it where you either have, you need the use of interpreters in the courtroom, whether it be for sign language or for,
another language. So I don't know if that would work here, but I think it needs to be added somewhere. We need to make it accessible as well.
Okay. Put that on there. Anything else? The next goal is reduce child abuse and neglect. An objective is developing a comprehensive, multidisciplinary response to child abuse. The objective paragraph. A measurable outcome for this specific goal is to increase prevention education, apply for more facilities. That needs to be, any suggestions on that? I think I need to research to see what they meant by applying for more facilities. I guess we need to be more specific on that.
I think maybe more like children advocacy centers, but, because like, we have mostly with Gasa and Edinburgh, but I don't know if there's something similar in Williston County, in Cameron County, so just to make it more, so that you're not relying on one center to
Okay.
go to.
Okay.
Yeah, we need
Yeah, and for this, for those of you who don't know, the child advocacy centers are not funded directly by the state, but we'll leave that there for their benefit should they decide to apply at a future date or for other grants. They can refer to this plan as a resource. Again, the percentages are somewhat conservative, so we'll leave them as they are unless you see otherwise. Strategies. Any changes? Moving on, potential resources. Again, all local, state, federal law enforcement, child protective services, advocacy centers, hospitals, health clinics, faith-based organizations, schools, and youth centers. The next goal is enhance security and courthouse safety. The objective, specialized training for court personnel and courthouse security personnel. Now the objective. Okay, measurable outcomes for this specific goal are to eliminate court outbursts, disruptions, disturbance will be reduced 10%. Personnel will receive training 2 times per year. Maintenance will be managed by court personnel with technical backup from vendor. This I have to research a little bit more.
Is this being done?
I'll research it to make sure what exactly, if they're meeting any of these goals or the measurable outcomes.
I think in the advocacy centers they are.
The advocacy centers? Okay. Strategies. and potential resources. Okay, the next goal is to enhance mental health, suicide prevention, and mental disability centers. Objective is to increase the number of programs providing mental health services. You have the objective statement. Okay, and the measurable outcomes.
Do you think it's just establish a local task force law enforcement? On the last,
Yes.
next to last sentence, because I'm not sure that it's only law enforcement that does mental health sections. It maybe would also be judges or, I guess one of my problems is I don't see an evaluation component on this. And so it's kind of hard for you guys to know if we're making any strides if we don't, you know, how do we know if we're meeting the goals? So do we have to put judges there too? Because if it's a task force of law enforcement to address mental health related issues, I'm not sure that always is the right person. Maybe hospital staff?
Okay, so add establish a local task force to include judges, law enforcement, hospitals.
Mental health providers maybe that are,
Mental health providers.
you know, I don't know if it's. I really don't know. Law enforcement, judges.
I just had a quick comment. The state is looking at closing the state centers for living. So I'm just noticing that one of your potential resources, mental health, mental retardation, we need to change that to the MRA or the local mental health authority, which would be Tropical Texas Behavioral Health. And then the other thing here is it says establish long-term residential facilities for persons with mental health issues. And that's under strategy number 4. I think we need to add also behavioral, because some of the individuals that reside in the state supported independent living centers have behavioral issues and are not able to adequately live in the community. So that's going to be a challenge for us within the next 2 years if they do close those centers, which it looks like they will be closing.
Okay. Get that. Under strategies, bullet number 4. You said to add, right? Add to after mental health, behavioral issues. Okay, one more time for the potential resources to lead mental health? Or
You can either
Reword.
put tropical Texas behavioral health, or if you just want to be broad, then you can put local mental health authority. But tropical covers the 3 counties that we currently serve, so you can put TTBH.
Okay.
Why is this section under, or this goal under criminal justice? Is that because of the suicide prevention? Shouldn't it be under health?
Yeah, this is actually a strong push by Criminal Justice Division. This year, they increased or actually made this a priority, mental health, under criminal justice.
Most of the people that have been killing people in the schools have been mentally ill.
And it can be under both. We'll relay that to Mr. Gonzalez. Ms. Salinas, you said under health, right? And health and human services?
Well,
And maybe it's already in there, Joe. Do you want to comment on this real quick?
Gosh, I really put everything away from the Health and Human Services section, but if I can have something in writing
Okay.
that I can look at, and if it's not there, then we can go ahead and add it, we'll look where is the appropriate area within Health and Human Services to add it to.
Okay. Put on there, provide to Mr. Gonzalez.
Yeah, 'cause I think we have a section there that's on mental health services.
Is mental health, yeah, it's there, but it is affecting now criminal justice. One, I know in the veterans courts, that's one of the issues there, drug and domestic violence and also criminal cases.
Mhm.
So it's definitely they're veterans, so they falls under 3 categories really. And then the law enforcement people also have to transport mental health patients to the facilities in San Antonio or wherever they're sending them.
Okay.
And I know that's the other issue. So it does go hand in hand, but I think it probably is covered under your health section. I'm not sure.
It's under, I think it's under the mental health status, which I think we changed that to mental health services
Right.
this morning, the lower Grand Valley. So, I mean, I'm sure we can have it.
Okay, I just think maybe this should be written a little bit so that it emphasizes criminal justice and veterans violence, violence committed by veterans, and so that it's a little bit more in relation to criminal justice.
Well, also can address the need for, for services, for preventive services, supportive services, for that particular population also. So, we can look at that section under Health and Human Services, because we also have a part there, a section for veterans.
Okay. And maybe we'll collaborate, maybe we'll incorporate some of the information that you have, and we'll provide you with what we have.
Yeah, because a lot of these usually, they cross into different sections.
Yeah.
Manuel,
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to point out that criminal justice under priorities that they put mental health in was more targeting a specialized training in law enforcement, not to encompass the whole mental health. So it's
Yeah, because I think that was one of the discussions, even at the CJAC level, the Criminal Justice Advisory Committee level, from peace officers saying that as far as training to deal with the mental health criminal, that there wasn't any in existence. So that's what they wanted to incorporate in the plans. So.
Again, it's geared more toward the law enforcement. I know right now in Cameron County, I think it's several counties, they have the region got a grant, and this is supporting funding to pay officers to deal directly with
people who have a mental illness, because it takes a lot of time away from the regular duties. So again, criminal justice is targeting more to special people.
Well, some of them though do have behavioral issues.
Yes,
So that's
yes.
why, and I just want to point out that I know training is getting the officers maybe mental health first aid CPR certified. That's a different certification, and it's rarely offered here.
So that mental task force, it's my understanding, and I was just talking to someone last week, it was new to me, so I was doing some research, and the officers are getting like a 2-week intensive training.
That's good.
What if we change the objective the way it is to just to increase the number of training programs providing mental health services, or the 4 programs providing mental health services?
Increase numbers?
Or just increase training for programs?
Increase mental health,
You're better off with just programs, because that's general, and that'll take anything. If you do training,
Okay.
and that specifically pops in it.
Yeah,
Okay,
because if you, that paragraph underneath, then you have to change a lot of stuff.
never mind. Okay, we'll leave it as is. Okay, from my watch, it's 5:04. We're here we're scheduled to be here till 5, so we still have quite a bit to go. So I do apologize. We have almost 20 goals combined between criminal justice and Homeland Security. But we'll conclude our session, but please take the information back with you and look over it, what's remaining to be reviewed. And if you have any comments, changes that you want to include, please email me or give me a call, and we can make sure that is included in our sections for your benefit. So thank you very much. Appreciate you taking your time to come out here, and have a safe drive home. Yes.
We also have one last regional meeting
Yes.
also.
Oh, yeah, I said that in the beginning, but also don't forget, tomorrow we have our 4 final programs from 8 to 5. And again, we have the regional meetings. We'll have the draft plan as a whole in this same room. And you're more than welcome to come by, stop by any of the booths we'll have, and review the plan on any of the comments that you made to make sure we included your comments. So again, thank you very much.